Hello everyone, and welcome back to Jenna Voice. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that is probably more controversial than a lot of the other topics that I choose for my videos, but I think it's an important one. It's something that I'm sure you already have or that you will deal with at some point in your career as a singer, and that is unsolicited advice. As a singer, I've had more instances than I can count of unsolicited advice, particularly in my undergraduate studies, because you're around a lot of younger singers who don't quite understand what unsolicited advice is, and everybody's learning, and so some students may think that they have an authority to say something if they think that you're doing something wrong. Well, the fact of the matter is they don't have that authority, and so I'm hoping by me making this video, you won't be one of those people who is giving people unsolicited advice, or if you are taking some unsolicited advice, how to handle those situations. So first, I think it's important to establish who in your life can give you advice to where it will not be considered unsolicited. And that list is pretty short, but it's pretty obvious as well. The people who can give you advice, rightly so, are your voice teacher or teachers, your voice coaches, your directors, though they're probably not going to say much in the way of your vocal technique, and your maestros or the conductors you work with. They may comment a little bit on your technique. They'll probably comment more on how you're singing in whatever piece you're doing, whether that's a choral piece or an opera or a musical. As far as people or other singers who are more at your level, I would say the only person who can give advice that is solicited would more likely be someone like a section leader in a choir. Someone who has been given some authority by a higher authority to say, if you notice something's not right, I want you to speak up about it and help the section become better and tighter. But that's really the only kind of exception that I can think of a younger singer who can possibly say something to you, or if you're a section leader, you can say something to other singers who are about your age if you're in the same ensemble as them. But other than that, your friends, people in your classes, people in shows you're doing, in operas you're doing, those people don't have a right to say anything about your technique, about your diction, about your acting. None of that is their business, and the same goes for you. It's important to understand that this goes both ways. Unsolicited advice can be given and it can be taken. So make sure, like I stated with that list of who's able to give advice, that you aren't also crossing a boundary in giving somebody advice that you shouldn't be. Now, why is this so important, you may ask? Well, like I said, particularly at a younger age, when we're all learning so much about technique and diction and acting, there is a tendency to want to start asserting what you're learning with those that you're observing around you. But the truth is, number one, you don't know everything yet. Number two, things that you may be saying will possibly contradict what their teacher or their coach is telling them. And those are the opinions that really matter. If somebody is trying to take in all these different opinions and advice from a bunch of different people, it's going to be confusing, it's going to be frustrating, and they're not going to understand what's helpful and what's not helpful. And that can be really dangerous and frustrating, particularly for younger singers. When you get into the professional world, when you're working in professional choirs, professional operas, professional musicals, it is never your place to tell your colleague how to do your job. And it's frankly one of the most annoying things to have somebody do that to you. It really doesn't matter how experienced you are. You've been hired for your own job, and that is the only thing you are really allowed to focus on. It is your job to do your job to the best of your ability. If you're spreading your attention to what other people are doing, you're really not focusing on what you need to be doing, and that means that you aren't doing your job to its best ability, and then you're possibly distracting that person that you're trying to correct, preventing them from doing what they need to do to the best of their ability. And it's just not productive for anybody. It's not. So when it comes to receiving unsolicited advice, a lot of what I do, honestly, is just learning to kind of deflect it in as polite a way as possible. I'd say this is step number one. Half of it's kind of ignoring what they're saying, or if they're like talking directly to you, I'll honestly say something along the lines of, oh, that's interesting, I'll check with my voice teacher, or I'll ask the director, or just say, that's an interesting thought, and brush it off your shoulders. Like, you don't need to necessarily address every little thing that somebody is saying to you. If you know it's not helpful, just let it go. If it's something you're like, oh yeah, that is kind of an interesting thought, then take that into your own consideration. If you want to ask somebody who has the authority to really answer you, then by all means go ahead and ask them. But the more that you kind of like agree or say, oh yeah, you're so right, when somebody gives you unsolicited advice, they're probably going to continue to do that because what they think they're doing is good and helpful by you saying, oh, that's a great idea, thank you for telling me. And it can be really hard to be less polite or to not agree with people. I have a hard time with that because I'm very much a people pleaser. I like to keep peace and not start any drama with people. So it's a hard lesson to learn, but it's really important for your education as well as establishing your boundaries between other people, professional and otherwise. What's okay to say and what's not okay to say. If somebody continues to tell you how to do your job, whether that's how to sing, how to act, how to pronounce something, and it's getting to the point where they're not really getting the hint that you're not interested in what they have to say, or they're starting to get kind of aggressive or bossy, I would say, if you can, number one, ask to speak to them outside of a rehearsal and say, look, I'm not comfortable with how you're treating me. It's not your job to tell me what to do or how to do it or what you think I'm doing wrong. It's the director's job, it's my teacher's job, but it's not your job. And if they don't listen to you or they aren't willing to talk to you in a private manner outside of a rehearsal or class, that's when I would say to go to the said director or teacher and say, this person is making me feel uncomfortable. They continue to try to tell me how to do things, and it's getting in the way of me being productive in this production, this class, my performing, and hopefully then that person of authority can step in and make it stop. But I would strongly suggest that you do your best to handle it on your own first and foremost, because especially if this is in a production situation where you have a director and you have a strict rehearsal schedule, they're likely incredibly busy and don't have time to deal with personal issues going on between cast members. But if it's a serious situation like I stated where you aren't able to communicate with that person who's bothering you to stop, then yes, you should say something, because then you aren't able to do your job in the production to its best ability. Okay, so I think that's all I have to say about unsolicited advice. I know this was a bit of a harder topic to maybe hear or understand or talk about, but Again, I think it's really important to understand what our boundaries are in terms of how we talk to our colleagues and what sort of things our colleagues are saying to us. And so I hope this can be helpful to you, especially those who are still in school, particularly your undergrad or maybe high school studies. If this was helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up. And if you've been in a situation where you've had to deal with somebody giving you unsolicited advice, leave a comment down below if you're comfortable sharing that story. I'd love to hear it and love to hear how you handled it. And as always, make sure you're subscribed so you can keep up with more videos like this one. And I will talk to you all very soon. Bye-bye.